Hi, Garth.
There we go. Hello, everybody. And let me
Morning, Dan.
see what's going on in the chat here. Hello, everybody. Good. All right. 41 people, so we're doing okay.
Very good.
One of the advantages or disadvantages, you can immediately see how many people are in the sanctuary by count.
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah, nobody has to sit there with a clicker at the narthex and do that.
We should all mute now, right?
Hi, Tony.
If you can hit the all mute except me, or yeah, everybody should mute on their own. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Dan Tinen. Welcome to the Franklin County Unitarian Universalist Zoom service, incorporating the three churches of the Northern Pioneer Valley, All Souls in Greenfield, Bernardston Unitarian, and First Parish of Northfield. My name's Dan Tinen, and I am a lay person. So that means I can say whatever I want without fear of getting fired. Just kidding. I could get fired. Anyway, so we are here and you're welcome. And we're being sponsored by Bernardston this morning. And if I can pull up my PowerPoint here, I've got one of the things that we like to do at Bernardston is start off with a rousing hymn. And I found one by Jason Shelton, who is one of our premier songwriter composers in the denomination. So let me share that with you. And share sound. There we go.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
And let's join together in our lighting of the chalice. May the light of this flame illuminate our minds. May the heat of this flame warm our hearts. May the focus of this flame bind us together in one loving community. And our declaration of fellowship. We unite to affirm that love is the spirit of this church and service its mission. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to give service to humanity. Okay. And now's the time when we set aside a moment for a brief sharing of joys and concerns. If you come to this gathering this morning with a joy that's so great that it will lift us all up, please feel free to share that briefly. By the same token, if you have a concern or a sorrow that you'd need the help of this community to help you bear it, it's also a time to share that as well. Keeping in mind our time constraints, we will have a time for announcements a little later. So let me pull up the congregational view. So if you, and you'll have to, I'll unmute you as I can if I see you fast enough. There are 40 different screens in front of me. Jenny, was that you?
Unmuted myself.
You weren't raising your hand? Okay, go ahead. Annette?
Oh, I'm gonna light a birthday candle for Robbie Ann. We got to have birthday cake yesterday. It was a big treat. It's a simple but a very important ritual in our family that everyone has to have a birthday cake.
It was outside with masks.
Outside in the wind in New York State. That's for Robbie Ann.
Is
We should have a
Robbie
great
here? I don't
dinner.
see. Let's see. Oh, I don't have them all open. Okay. Oh, Betty, go ahead. You can unmute.
I light a candle of joy because of my age. I got my first vaccine earlier this week, and I'm scheduled to get my second shot March 3rd. So things are looking good.
Yay.
Along with that, I'd like to light a candle of joy that I read in the paper this morning that new cases are down, I think, 40% from a 2-week period earlier. Oh, Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to light 2 candles, one of concern and one of joy. The concern is that, very grateful and happy for people who are getting vaccinated. And unfortunately, there's no vaccination for mental illness. Pandemic is justly focused on saving people's physical conditions. And there's a kind of silent pandemic of all the people who are dealing with really severe mental repercussions from it. And I like this for all of those people, but in particular for a dear friend of mine who's in a deep depression. So the first candle is for Greg. And my candle of joy is that for the past 5 years, February 14th has been like Singles Awareness Day for me. And this February 14th, I actually have a woman who I can share that day with, and I feel really lucky to have her in my life. So this candle is for Debka.
Al McIntyre?
Morning, everybody. My concern was just that had a passing of a colleague of some 5 years. We just lost to pancreatic cancer in Colorado Springs. And I spent extensive time with him globally and also spent just amazing time in the state of Colorado in the Rockies. So we've grown to have quite a close connection. And very interesting to lose him. He's a year older than myself. And then to think that my dad had contracted the pancreatic cancer at 85, 84, that went on for another 10 years. But I was also very grateful to have another friend, probably known just about the same amount of time. And we went up on a hill in Gill and we slid down several times. A couple of guys in their mid-60s jumping on sleds, commenting to one another, gee, it's great to be 10 again. And it was a wonderful way to kind of like process that whole thing, to realize I can reach out to another friend in the great outdoors as safely as we can. And just recognize that passing and realize that it's these friendships that we need to hold on to and just embrace. As we see some leave, we still have those that are equally important in our lives.
Gary? Oh, Gary, you had your hand raised?
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were unmuting. I just unmuted. We're cool. So lighting a birthday candle for my beloved favorite quarantimate, whose birthday is today. And a concern, we're actually staying home and not doing what we were supposed to be doing to celebrate, because we have a really sick cat that has a recurrence of diabetes, is having a diabetic episode, and we can't get her blood sugar down yet. So we've been several trips to the vet this past week, back and forth. And, yeah. There she is.
What's her name?
Her name is Arwen. It's actually she's listed as under participants is who we are. So.
Marilyn, did you have something to share?
Me? Well, speaking of dogs, my dog is on the way out. The 13 and a half, and he just sleeps all the time, like me. And but he's still going out for short walks, and he's still eating, not as much, but he's still eating. So we'll see how long it goes. He's a wonderful dog, beautiful dog. That's it.
Thank you. I'm looking here. Raise your hand. Jennifer, you have to unmute yourself, though. I can't do that for you.
I just found out this week that a very good friend of mine from the UU Fellowship in Bennington, Vermont, just passed away at the beginning of the month of January. And that was sad to me because I didn't get to see her this summer because of COVID. So very lovely woman.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else raise their hand? Wave your hand frantically like this, because otherwise it's a little hard to pick you out. All right. Well, we light one last candle for all of those joys and concerns which we carry unspoken in our hearts, and hope for blessings for all during the week.
I'm going to add one candle for Peter, who is feeling a little under the weather, but he's with us this morning, and that you don't have COVID.
Okay. Well, along with that concept of, sharing there's a wonderful song that I found. By the way, I didn't give credit. The first hymn was sung by the Foothill Church Choir, and that's in a sort of north of where I used to live in Los Angeles. And this one is courtesy of the Oakland Choir. Or do I have it right? I might have it screwed up, but it's Baltimore. I'm sorry.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am faultless, will you understand? Will you believe me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
And now I'd like to have a responsive reading. Oops, wrong button. And Kate, are you able to read the words in italics for us?
Yes.
Thank you. We used to do this with everybody opening their mics, but because of delays, it just gets awfully confusing. So, I mean, the reason I chose this reading is that my topic is a difficult one, and we're talking about a conflict of principles and of going through a sort of embattled time. So, never does hatred cease by hating in return.
Only through love can hatred come to an end.
Victory breeds hatred.
The conquered dwell in sorrow and resentment.
They who give up all thought of victory or defeat
May be calm and live happily at peace.
let us overcome violence with gentleness.
Let us overcome evil by good.
Let us overcome the miserly with liberality.
Let us overcome the liar by truth.
Oops. Okay, stop the share here. And now, Annette, do you have any? It's a time for announcements. Annette, do you have any things to say? Since you usually do this.
I do. On Saturday, the 13th, and I think that's coming up at 6 o'clock, we're going to have a women's group Zoom. If you're not on my email list, I will send the link out this week, late in the week. And if you're not on my list and want to be on the list for the women's group, I'm at annette@bernardstonunitarian.org. Send me an email with your email. Thank you. It'll be just a fun gathering for an hour and a half. We could catch up with each other.
I've got a couple announcements. One is All Souls is conducting a survey of our both participants and members. So it was in our newsletter twice now. So please fill it out and send it back so we know whether you're interested in us searching for a minister and other things. The second announcement is that there is a social justice meeting at 1 o'clock this Tuesday, 1 p.m. this Tuesday. So contact Molly Chambers if you want the link.
I'd like to follow up on that All Souls announcement. Our church has been really reconsidering our covenant. Dan mentioned some things about covenant in this service, and I hope to explore those in more depth on February 21st. And if anyone is interested in having a look at the covenant or offering some input into the proposed new covenant, we would really welcome that.
I should know this, but I don't. What is next week's service going to be?
Well, that is a question that I have. Melissa, are you going to do the service, or is your 3-month replacement person going to do it?
Allison.
Allison is actually here.
I am here.
Oh,
And-
Allison Sirk.
Yes, I am. Yes, and I will be doing the service next Sunday.
And do you have a topic?
We are embarking on a three-session examination of the Declaration of Fellowship at Northfield. And so love is the doctrine of our church is the first service. Appropriate for Valentine's Day.
Okay, thank you.
And All Souls is fortunate to have Woolard Lett come. He was only able to come on the 14th. So he's going to be talking about reparations and the eighth principle. And well, let's leave it at that. Woolard Lett's talking to All Souls Social Justice.
But you should know about Woolard Lett, that he's African-American. He is from New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. And he is the field officer for the entire New England church region. So he serves 253 churches as the field coordinator and trainer.
All right. And we will have, you know, if these are both being held at 10:30, they will be available for you to see on YouTube. I'm trying to make we have quite the library going. Anyway, so let's proceed. You know, as a musician, I'm trying to improve my sight reading skills a little bit. So I am working my way through the hymnal, and it's amazing how many hymns there are that we've never done. And now that we're on Zoom, it's not a problem for the congregational to sing. And I found this, I think this hymn lyrically is covering what a lot of people are feeling these days. So let me share this with you.
Today that seems so long, so strange, so bitter, will soon be some forgotten yesterday. Nay, do not weep, new hopes, new dreams, new faces, joy yet unspent of all the unborn years will prove your heart a traitor to its sorrow, and make your eyes unfaithful to their tears.
You know, some people say that Unitarians can't have a crisis of faith because we don't really have a faith. Oh, yes, we can. My crisis of faith, and perhaps you had one too, began a month ago. At about 4 o'clock on January 6th, I got a news flash on my phone from the New York Times that the joint session of Congress was under assault by a mob of Trump supporters. I dropped everything I was doing and turned on my TV, and until about 1 o'clock in the morning, I was spellbound watching people doing atrocious things that made my blood boil. Let's not sugarcoat this. The attempt to stop a joint session of Congress that's explicitly called for by the Constitution was an assault against almost everything that Unitarian Universalists stand for. Democracy, the rule of law, justice, diversity, multiculturalism, and even religious freedom. Underplayed or perhaps ignored in a sense by in much of the news coverage is the fact that a substantial portion of that mob was made up of Christian fundamentalist nationalists who were carrying crosses and flags emblazoned with Jesus 2020. Their goal is to make America Christian again. It's also worth mentioning, because I've never heard this talked about much in the mass media, that the Klan traditionally targeted not only Jews and Blacks, but Catholics. And both Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, who the mob was calling for their heads, they're both devout Roman Catholics. Anyway, back to my living room as I watched these neo-Confederates achieve Robert E. Lee's dream of invading our nation's capital, which was stopped at the Battle of Gettysburg. I began screaming at the television, why don't they shoot these guys? If a Black man can be shot for holding a cell phone, why can't a white guy be shot for holding a spear and beating a group of police with it? Isn't it a legitimate use of force to protect and defend an assembly of elected legislatures from all 50 states, not to mention the second and third in line for the presidency? As the mob broke windows and doors and assaulted police officers, killing one with a 50-pound fire extinguisher, they were carrying a flag with the inscription "Law and Order." Let me show that to you. You know, and somehow they didn't see the irony in this. And in my anger, I confess that I thought, screw the tear gas. Where are the machine guns? I was just as angry at that group of domestic terrorists as I was at the jihadi terrorists on 9/11. And I'm not proud of losing my temper. I mean, maybe right now some of you are shocked that I would let my emotions carry me away from our principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Every person. But we also believe in the use of the democratic process in society, meaning free and fair elections. And if there was a shred of substantial evidence that the election was rigged, which would somehow have to involve a conspiracy of dozens of secretaries of state and thousands of poll workers, I might have been in that group assaulting the Capitol. But there was no such evidence. So it was clear to me that they were trying to overturn democracy, and that's a core value for me. It hooked me. Those people with their flags and spears and military garb and bear spray weren't, in any traditional sense of the word, Republicans. Now, I grew up with Republicans on the North Shore of Chicago. My first senator was Everett Dirksen. My first congressman was Donald Rumsfeld. I knew and respected Republicans. The mob attacking Congress were not Republicans, but anti-Democrats, neo-Confederates, willing to break up the Union because the presidential election didn't go their way, just as the Deep South seceded from the Union after Lincoln was elected, who wasn't on any of the ballots in the South, by the way. It's a good thing I was alone as I ranted and raved at my television. If my wife had been there, she would have made me turn off the television and calm down, but she's in Seattle with her grandson, our grandson, and I kept watching. Anger is a strange emotion. It feels bad, but it also feels a little good. But anger is an appropriate emotion when what you hold dear is in danger, when people are trying to tear down things that have taken centuries to build, when people are trying to cheat you. Now, the mob believed that Congress was doing that. And I believed the mob was doing that. So we were united in our rage at each other. The best way to destroy a country or a community of any kind is to get people angry at each other by telling them they're not going to have a country anymore and they have to fight like hell to get it back. And now is the time for trial by combat. To tell them that everything is unfair, that reasonable public health measures are an infringement of their rights, that famous politicians are actually pedophiles and cannibals who gather in pizza parlors to drink the blood of babies. Now, the president said the election was stolen, a big fraud, and was in fact a big landslide for him. And they believed him and believed the right-wing media and several senators. And why wouldn't they be enraged? Well, there's an old Christian saying, hate the sin, but love the sinner. And Sarah Silverman said, I hate the liars, but I can't hate those who have been lied to. One of the questions I'm going to ask you to ponder later is, who stands to benefit from Americans becoming so angry with each other? Our friend Jim Scott wrote a song that starts like this. For this we stand, all peoples of the earth, in spirit as in law, across the sacred land, a worth and dignity bestowed to each as right of birth, our lives in interdependence. For this we stand. People have a worth and dignity even when they're out of control, even when they're racist, homophobic, xenophobic, misanthropic, anti-Semitic, and most of all, irrational. Who says that Unitarian Universalists don't struggle with our faith? Our faith is being tested, and it's going to be tested for some years to come. It's hard to accept that we are interdependent, even with those people on the Capitol steps. There was a political cartoon in the 1770s. It was made actually by Benjamin Franklin that said, join or die. And our Constitution was written to make a more perfect union between different states that had different priorities and different cultures. Now, the Civil War wasn't fought by everybody to free the enslaved, but to preserve the Union. We are the United States because if we weren't, we'd all be weaker. And liberals and conservatives alike need to realize that we are two wings of a bird. A sad truth is that while our churches strive to be welcoming places for people of all races, gender identities, and religious backgrounds, if a person with a MAGA hat came into one of our parish halls, they probably wouldn't receive a really warm greeting. And that's not the way America used to be. Politics shouldn't be the dominant feature of our identity. It should be about policy positions and slightly different views about the best way to manage our affairs, not a blood sport. You know, political parties can have different goals, but they shouldn't have different facts. Well, let me go back to the question I was shouting at my TV that night. Why didn't they shoot these guys? Well, in retrospect, it's good that they didn't, despite extreme provocation. Now, there's been a lot of talk about their lack of preparedness, and fingers have been pointed at the various agencies involved. What people don't realize if they haven't visited Washington on a regular basis is that the Capitol and DC police are the most experienced forces in the world at dealing with demonstrations because there are demonstrations in DC almost every day. And it's been drummed into these folks that using deadly force will make the situation worse. And in the end, they were successful at protecting our legislators and the electoral process. The building can be repaired and cleaned up. But if the Capitol Police had been carried away by the kind of anger I felt that night, we'd be in a much worse social situation today. I mean, think of the year 1770, when redcoats fired into a crowd of Bostonians who were harassing and threatening them. That use of force didn't wind up being a good thing for the British Empire. The Boston Massacre stands to this day as a cause of the American Revolution. Most of you, I can see on my screen here today, can remember 1970 when National Guardsmen killed 4 Kent State students, and 11 days later, 2 Jackson State students were killed. How did that turn out for the Nixon administration? So whatever the reasons for the restraint of the Capitol Police that day, it did deprive the mob of martyrdom. Instead of being able to portray themselves as victims of a violent deep state, they were portrayed as a group of costumed weirdos who betrayed the very values they purported to uphold. Again, I ask you to ponder the question, who or what benefits from our being so angry at each other? Abraham Lincoln once said this. He said that all the armies of Europe could never conquer this country, but if they were ever to fall, it would be by our own hand. He said, if destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free people, we must live through all time or die by suicide. Who or what would benefit from that suicide? Who'd like to see the beacon of democracy tearing itself apart? Here's one idea. In the long view of history, democracy has been the rare exception to the much more common tendency towards aristocracy. Caesars, chiefs, kings, emperors, czars, kaisers, dictators, bosses, where the 1% own the land, the castles, the plantations, and dominate the rest with an iron hand. In the words of our hymn, Bread and Roses, 10 that toil while one reposes. Domination and repression have been the default setting of human society for millennia, and that's not easy to overcome, both externally and internally and psychologically. As economic power becomes concentrated in fewer hands, as it has during the last decades, a strange phenomenon happens among those 1%, a toxic desire for still more. Now, opposed to that, democracy has this nasty habit, in the eyes of wannabe aristocrats, to free the enslaved, to ensure fairness under law instead of oppression under power. So there's one force that consciously or unconsciously that would benefit from a dictatorship instead of a democracy, because when democracy is overthrown, the rich are free to get richer without any regulation or constraint as the poor get poorer. Well, the other theme I'm talking about this morning is how we balance militance with compassion. And religious liberals have always had this problem of how to balance standing up for what we believe in with having compassion or at least understanding for the other side. One of the shortcomings of liberalism is that it has a certain naivete about evil, that evil will collapse of its own weight, that the innate goodness of humanity will overcome our dark side. The greatest thinker on this problem is a Christian theologian from the 20th century, Reinhold Niebuhr. In 1933, when the Great War had turned most Christians into pacifists, he warned that the rise of Nazism in Germany wouldn't be controlled by good intentions alone. To be blind to the danger, he said, would be to collaborate with evil. To love our enemies cannot mean that we must connive with their injustice. It does mean that beyond all moral distinctions of history, we must know ourselves with our not only in the bonds of common humanity, but also in the bonds of common guilt by which that humanity has become corrupted. There is a moral distinction between people who are being misled and people who are judicious and searching for the truth. You have to stand for what you believe in, and while recognizing that what you believe in is never perfect. Now, I can recognize the danger of the rage in that mob at the Capitol because I recognize the danger of the rage in myself that same night. As Niebuhr said, the common guilt by which humanity has become corrupted. It's not easy to stand firmly for what you believe in without dehumanizing the people who oppose you and everything you stand for. Honest confrontation without resorting to violence is a difficult skill to learn, but the alternative is disintegration and powerlessness. So, how are you handling this crisis of faith? How firmly do you need to take a stand? How do you balance compassion with commitment? All of us need to ponder this question. The reason that democracies produce healthier and more productive societies than aristocracies do, that a shared discussion between diverse, responsible viewpoints results in wiser decisions than the ones that are handed down by a dictator. Now, we're not a very diverse group this morning by age or race or culture, but even in our relatively homogeneous group, you will come up with responses to this challenge to our faith that nobody else in our group might think of. So now that all of your voices can be heard, we're going to break into small groups of 4 to 5 people for, let's say, 5 minutes of discussion. Let's say 10 minutes of discussion, which I've like you to ponder some questions, which are in the next slide, but I'll also put these questions in the chat. Now, I realize that when we've done breaking into breakout rooms before, every computer is a little bit different about where this happens. There's usually a little pop-up that comes up that says join group X. So it looks like there's about 40 of us here. I'm gonna stop the share. This will be here. Hold on. And you'll receive a notice when you'll have a. Let's see here. Let's say. I think we're going to break up into about groups of 4 to 5 per room. So this is coming your way right now. And if you don't want to participate, I'll probably stay here in the parish hall for a while. And here we go. I'm opening all the rooms and you should receive an invitation. So you've been invited to join breakout rooms, and we'll have different breakout rooms for coffee hour.
Are we all joining back to a bigger group now?
We are all joining back to a bigger group now. We closed the breakout rooms, and I'm sure there were 10 different conversations, all of which probably should be summarized, and we could spend 2 hours doing that, but it's Super Bowl Sunday, so I don't think I have time to do that. But I would like to share with you that song I referred to. Hold on. That was written by Jim Scott. So stand by for just a moment.
Wow. That's really great.
And our closing words this morning are from the hymnal number 694, written by Frederick Gillis. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. Go in peace, stay healthy, stay well, and come back to us. Thank you for your kind attention. I appreciate it. And if
Thank
you
you.
like, I
Thank
can
you, Dan.
open up a couple of breakout rooms. We can all stay here in the parish hall and talk about what happened in our groups or whatever you'd like me to do.
I just want to say thanks, Dan, for that. That was needed.
I hope it wasn't too disturbing. I really didn't
No.
want to preach about it originally. I was going to do something nice and esoteric about theology, which is probably.
It was truth, which is what we need.
Yes, Dan, thank you for speaking your truth. Thank you for speaking many words that many of us were thinking at that time and since. And in our breakout group, we talked about the struggle with loved ones, whether in family or friends, who there are diametrically opposed perspectives which cause ache in one's heart and a difficulty in trying to find common ground to be able to stay in relationship with those in the same meaningful way prior to what has transpired over these last years.
It's key to recognize for both sides the value of being a large unit, you know, to not break up into separate factions, you know, to not balkanize ourselves.
I think, Dan, the line that really jumped out at me was to hate the lies, but love the liars. And I think one way that it has helped me to cross that divide a little bit is to be involved in something called Braver Angels, which, if anyone is interested, is basically fostering inter-party dialogue, ways for Democrats and Republicans to converse without trying to convert. To listen with curiosity and respect, seeking not necessarily to agree, but at least to understand. So anyway, there's lots of information about Braver Angels online, and that's all I wanted to say.
Well, there's the Social Justice Committee showed this film. Somebody else will have to join in, and it was a great film. It was about healing from hate is the name of the film, but we had to rent it. And if you're breaking out into small groups, it's not worth renting it unless if the same 8 people show up again, which I think is unlikely, but it might be if you all were interested. And we showed it in the wider community. It's actually the leaders of the hate groups introducing why they got involved and how they healed from hate. And it's extremely interesting to watch.
I bet.
I know I certainly had the same crisis that Dan talked about. And that's what was just such a sort of a wake-up call to me. I could just think about how I thought the guillotine would be too good for them. And I even, as I was watching the insurrection in the Capitol, I had was texting a friend, and I said, release the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, and then ship them all to Guantanamo Bay. That's where they deserve. That's where domestic terrorists belong.
I think I feel extremely, in that context, I feel extremely lucky that when I was coming of age, 69, 70, 71, you know, I was deeply and passionately involved in a movement that would very much have liked a very different, far more what I would call democratic and progressive government in this country. And so I feel like I understand from the inside, looking at the institutional structure and saying, wow, the institutional structure is really, really, really hurting people. We need something dramatically different. So I understand what that experience is, and I understand that it can come from very high ideals to have that experience. So, you know, we have this huge problem of different truth realities that people have been living in. But I can understand that if one actually trusts their own sources, and those sources seem to be competent and professional and have their own set of facts. I understand if you're in a different truth reality where that can lead. So, you know, so I don't label people as somehow out of the spectrum of what people who really care might get involved in, although long ago I did opt for nonviolence, but I understand.
Ariel, I'd like to just jump in and add something I had to cut for time, so we'd have time to discuss, by Reinhold Niebuhr, which is, there was quite a crisis in American liberalism in the 1930s. Actually, liberals were sort of isolationist at the time, and that issue of how militant to be while maintaining that was, there's this magazine called The Christian Century, and there's dozens of articles from the 30s which have been largely forgotten, which was really about, gee, what do we do about this? So it's very similar to what we're facing in the United States today.